So I'm going to use the interface range command to do this. So interface range, this allows me to configure multiple interfaces simultaneously, and we'll do F0/1 space dash space 23. I don't want to turn this on the interface going over to the firewall. That'd probably be a bad idea. All right, so we do that. Now notice the command prompt is now config-if-range. So the command to turn port security on is, well, port security. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to give you another command. And this is probably a better thing to do, both from a security perspective and from a usability perspective. If all of these ports, all 23 of these ports that I'm pointing at here, if they're all going to users, meaning workstations, even routers would be effective here, so long as they're not carrying multiple VLANs, like what would happen if you're going between a switch and another switch, or a switch and a router that was doing some form of Ethernet trunking, things we haven't talked about yet. But as long as this is going over to a host, you really should type this command, and that command is switch port host. And it actually does, the command switch port host is a batch command. It's actually doing these three things. It's turning switch port mode and setting it to access, meaning it's an access device, not a trunk device. It's turning spanning tree port fast to enable. We're going to talk about that in ICND 1, or excuse me, ICND 2. And then channel grouping, which is ether channel, is also being disabled. Another thing we're going to be talking about later. But for now, since we're kind of at this point and doing basic configuration, I want to show you this basic setup prompt. And even though I haven't explained all the details as to each of these individual options that's being turned on, is a very common thing and will protect you quite a bit on your network. It's also going to speed up things. This port fast option definitely helps things out quite a bit by having that on. Okay, so we have that done. All 23 ports are now set to act in host mode. By default, they're not in host mode. They're actually in an auto negotiation type mode. So that's definitely going to speed things up. Okay, so the other thing I want to do is I mentioned port security, and port security locks down the ports to a number of MAC addresses that you define. So the command is port security. Nope. Switch port. No. The command was port security. What do I know? Nope. Interesting. The command doesn't seem to be here. Very interesting. Okay, well maybe it's something to do with his iOS. I might have to skip this part and come back to it. Command is usually port security. You know what? Maybe it's an issue of the range. Let me try this. Interface F0/1. Nope, not there. All right, so the command port security doesn't seem to work. Maybe this particular version of iOS, they changed the command. I'll do some research off camera and figure out what they did with the command and how they changed it. So from now, I want to do one more thing from a security perspective, and we'll do this with the range command, and that is for unused ports. We're going to set them to be shut down. Anytime you have a port on a switch that isn't going to be plugged in anything, it's generally a good idea from a security perspective to have those ports disabled. So for all of our ports, port 2 through port 23, since they're not, oops, I forgot my space, since they're not actually plugged into anything, we'd like to actually shut them down. So the command shutdown is there. Okay, so I want to save my configuration and show you with the show interface status command the current status of all these interfaces are now set into a disabled state because I used the shutdown command on all of them. So the only two that are actually operational are port 24 and port 1 based on our wiring that we did. This was port 1, this is port 24. I could use port 1 and 2, but I don't know why. I just Commonly, you take the last port. If it's an uplink port or going over to the rest of the infrastructure, I take the last port. That way my ranges end up nice and neat on my network if I'm actually plugging in a bunch of users. Okay, so that's it for this capture. I might come back to the port security thing and figure out what happened there.